Hi, welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is why I disagree with the Duran, and it seems to me I'm always disagreeing with him. Well, I'm not always. I'll allow some of their videos through. Okay, this video is about, was released yesterday, and it's called Russia Prepares for Next Phase, Putin Orders Creation of Special Coordination Council. Now, as you know, I have listened to Alexander, and I have a lot of respect for him, and he knows a lot of stuff, and he's highly intelligent. But sometimes he makes up a narrative that more or less sounds like fictional. He puts in information that's not really there. Now, how can I say it? I know people like that. When I worked at the Defense Department and so on, there was one of the engineers that could talk very convincing, made a lot of statements. He was a project engineer, and in meetings, the managers always listened to him and praised him high and so on. And then we as specialists sat there, and we couldn't react because the statements were so made that we first have to think about this and looked for evidence, and then we could have responded. So we were very conservative in our approach, where this guy was very liberal and let flow of the information and the narrative, whether it was true or not, that's something different. In any case, and we always looked at ourselves when he was talking, and then after the meeting we realized that he was talking a lot of nonsense. He was making statements that he couldn't really substantiate. And unfortunately, I have to put Alexander Mercouris in that same category. But I do not take away his knowledge. No, he still does that. And that guy also knew and so on, but he liked to make wide statements. So let's take at the first part of the video, where they talked about martial law in the 4 Ukrainian republics or oblasts, or what do you call if they become part of Russia? Provinces, the new 4 introduced provinces into Russia. And then they talked about the special coordination council that was recently set up by Putin. And then they talked about the war situation, or the military operation in Kherson especially. Now, you can listen to the video. My assessment is a little bit wrong, different. And I could pronounce a question that I would have asked him, but I've decided rather to provide a different narrative. One has to look at, again, start from the initial special military operation in the Donbass or in Ukraine. The Russians, again, like I just want to clarify again, the Russians acknowledged the independence of the 2 republics, Lugansk and Donetsk. Immediately, these 2 provinces asked for military assistance. Russia provided that military assistance as a supporting function to the conflict. Most of the fighting was still done by the militia of the Donbass regions, with the support of the artillery and armored division and aviation of the Russians. Donbass were always in control. That one should make clear. Yes, there was a military operation from Crimea to the Kherson sub-regional area, and that was for the benefit of the Russians. But that operation was muddled into the main operation by the freeing the Donbass and Lugansk. So nobody really talked about it, but that was actually a Russian invasion, if you want to call it. Technically a Russian invasion. Because they needed the water supply and the power supply to Crimea to be stabilized, and they needed a road, bridge or land bridge between Crimea and the Donbass, and that's why they had to do it. But like I said, nobody really discusses it. In any case, when these 4 provinces now became part of Russia, the whole legal basis have changed. This is now Russian territory. And in order to bring it to the Russian, the martial law that did exist in these 4 provinces, or oblasts, I would like to call them provinces, more my nature. Oblast is a foreign concept. They are now Russian territory, and they have to be incorporated into the legal framework of the Russian Federation. And therefore, the martial law was not something new. It already existed and was called out by the Donbass governments. And it was just now incorporated into the Russian law. So it made it a legal, everything is now legal according to Russian Federation guidelines, laws, and principles. So martial law is not really an issue. It's just a formality of technically legal principles. Then we look at the Special Coordination Council. And as Alexandra said, it consists out of a lot of different branches, security branches, military branches, economic branches, municipalities, and support, and stuff like that. And it is going to be led by the Prime Minister. Anyways, when I've tried to look up the real function of this council, and there's not a lot of information available, and whatever information is available, you can look at on the Russian government website. You can also look at tasks and so on. Very little detail is provided. So whatever Alexander is talking is what he assumes, and this is his own narrative. There is no evidence that supports his theories. Nothing. He even wants to try to say what it has been used in previous wars, and then he refers to the Second World War where something similar was there. If he wanted to make that comparison, then he should rather say, was such a council established during the Chechen War or the Georgian Ossetia War, then I could have understood that. But I don't believe this council was established. Maybe in the Chechen War. But let it be like that. My opinion is, again, it's an integration of where it was a special military operation, and it's still a special military operation. Alexander doesn't understand it, but it's still, because the alternative would be a declaration of war. So if they change it's not going to be a terrorist action. Forget about this. I don't know why they always talk about terrorists. It's either a special military operation or it's a declaration of war. And when the declaration of war is made, then the whole country's legal system changes of Russia. And that is not what Putin wants. So there will be no declaration of war unless NATO joins the fight and it becomes a third world war. That's the only reason we're in it. Or if part of NATO, like Poland, the Polish people are mad enough in any case. Then there's a war between Poland and Belarus, and Russia joins in there. And then we go. And then if the rest of the NATO countries will join, that's a debatable point, but I'm not going to discuss that. So there is and will remain a special military operation, because the alternative is too severe. Special military operation provides a necessary legal framework for doing certain things and not a totally clamp down on Russia. Because if war is declared, then we have a real war economy, mobilizations, and all the crap that goes with it. And nobody wants that. So, so let's go back then to the Special Coordinating Council. Again, my argument is that going back to the original change, what has happened in the last couple of weeks? Number one, we have the supportive role of Russia supporting the two republics. That has changed. The Russians have now assimilated the 4 provinces, and the Russian military has now taken over. That's why you see that there is only one general being appointed to control the whole military effort. Then 4 provinces became part of Russia, which had a different legal system. And therefore, new laws and new principles have to be changed in order to make provisions for these 4 provinces. And number 3 is, there is a lot of reconstruction that has to be done in these provinces because of all the damage, the war damage that was created. We can specifically call to Mariupol, but Mariupol is not the only town or city that was destroyed. There's a lot of other damage that has been done. Electricity has been cut off, water supplies have been interrupted, and some more. So there's a lot of reconstruction that has to be done. Number 4 is that we have now the mobilization of the 300,000 troops. And if you haven't heard of what was going on, there were a lot of problems that were experienced because the records of who was under service or who had military service or who was fit were not always available. And then a lot of initiatives were taken by local government employees, or I don't know how you call it, administrative personnel, and they made a lot of problems. And Putin even stressed that they will look into it and correct that, and they wouldn't have been aware of that if they hadn't done this mobilization. So there is a lot of stuff that has to be corrected. Then the 5th item actually is that, according to some reports, some of the Russian reserves being called up had to buy some of their gears themselves. Now, I'm not totally sure what gear they were supposed to buy, but when I was, Brian Berletic also talked about that, and he referred to his time when he was in the US Marine. They were issued basic kit, and the good stuff they had to buy themselves. Now, when I was in the Army, and I did my national service for 2 years, I was given everything. There was nothing that I needed to buy. So I'm not totally sure what any soldiers must buy, because you have to have a uniform soldier, not uniform like enclosed, but uniform in terms of the soldiers have to have the same stuff. That's a form part of discipline. You can't have a yellow pet and the other guy has a blue pet and the other guy has a red armband and the other one has black gloves and so on. They all have to look the same. You still get the rucksack, you still get a sleeping bag, you still get the boots, you still get your water canteen, your eating utensils. These are all standard items. Now, what I could think about is that there was a lack of this stuff, maybe, because all the recruits were pulled from different regions. So this committee can, I believe, well, my assumptions or my idea is that these guys will look into it, so that if there is ever another mobilization or a declaration of war, then there would be, the system would work, the system would be geared for and ready for the new recruits, and that every soldier will get the tools and the equipment and the supplies that he needs. So that's another item. And in the 6 items, well, there's a lot of talk that the Russians are running out of missiles and stuff like that, which is mostly Western propaganda. I don't think they are running out of missiles and armament, but they do have expended a lot of it, and they need replenishment. You have to replace all that weaponry and ammunition that you used. So that's basically the 6th item that this council should be doing. And I'm sure if I think a little bit more, there's a lot of other tasks that this committee must be done. But it's not a mobilization of the economy of Russia, as Alex Zander tries to insinuate. No. It is to resolve a lot of changes and problems that were experienced in the last couple of weeks. That is why the committee went. Just for the sakes, no other sources are really talking about this council. It's only Alexander that talked about it, but for him it's a big issue, and for him it shows that Russia is now on a war footing, and as they talk, him and Alex and so on, Russia is preparing for a huge military operation. Maybe that NATO will join the Ukrainian war. I'm sorry, that's a little bit far-fetched, number one. And number two is that there's no reason for that. What I expect, actually, is that the Russians are now digging in to their defensive lines as much and as best as possible. They are repelling all the Ukrainians' attacks that are currently happening, and they're waiting for basically the 300,000 recruits or reservists. Now they already received some of them, and these guys are helping on the front, and therefore you can see that there's a change in there is no more ground lost by the Russian army. Each and every attack that the Ukrainians are launching is being repelled. Again, as the narrative goes, with huge losses. Now, I've said that is a relative concept in any case, and if you do offensive actions, then you don't lose 100 soldiers. You lose a lot more. Now, if you ever want to go and watch some videos, I could show you, but I'm not sure if YouTube will allow that. There's a website called southfront.org, and there are some of the videos that the Russian soldiers have made of dead Ukrainian soldiers. Sometimes they lay in group of two or three guys together, but is that not that many? And I'm a little bit not skeptical about that, but you know, I would have expected that there would have been a lot more blood, but there is very little blood. All the soldiers that are being shown have the vests on. I don't see any headshots. I don't see any ripped off legs or arms that they can bleed to death. I don't see any stomach wounds and so on, so I'm not sure how these guys died. Which puts me in a little bit of a doubt, a similar way that I doubt the Russian Ministry of Defense daily reports of all the stuff that they are shooting and killing and destroying and neutralizing and whatever words they use. In any case, so then they talk a little bit about the offensive on Kherson. And if you have followed other sources, you will notice that there's sort of a standstill. The front lines have been stabilized. There is no more advances of Ukrainians in the north, neither in Lyman direction. The Russians are advancing in Bakhmut area. But the biggest battle that everybody expected is in Kherson. And I can understand why the Ukrainians are focusing on that area. It will be a huge blow for the Russians. And they have, before the military mobilization, they have gained significant grounds in that area. So it's not that they did nothing. But in any case, so what everybody is criticizing the Ukrainians is that they do attacks against the Russians, and then they are repelled, and then they suffer losses, and then do another attack, and then they are repelled, and then they retreat again. And this is all considered bad. Well, none of us are really military personnel. But what do people expect of a war? Do they want the Ukrainians to sit in their barracks or in their trenches and then wait for the Russians? The Russians not going to come. The Russians first going to do a lot of artillery strikes, and they will be dead before they even see the Russians. The tanks and the APCs and fighting vehicles and so on will be destroyed wherever they are positioned and stationary. The manpower will be destroyed. So are the Ukrainians not supposed to fight, or what are they supposed to do? War is war. The one side attacks, the other side defends, and then the roles can reverse and men die. It's horrible. If you look at these photos on South Front, it is horrible and sad. And you always ask yourself the big question, why? Why do men have to die? But that's a philosophical question. The bottom line, Henrik, is if Ukraine does nothing, it's being destroyed. If it attacks, it's being destroyed. So there is no real choice. Kherson is a target. They have achieved some advances, successes. Give credit where credit is due. Will they be? They have penetrated a certain Russian front line, and then there were reserves were brought in from the Russians, and then they repelled them and drove them back. But they did penetrate that defensive line. So who says these are not explorative attacks? See where the weak areas are, see where the enemies are, see what weapons they might have, what type of are they employing. You know, it's more like, yes, you will lose men, but like I said, war is war. Well, then they start continuing and talking about the coming midterm elections in America. And while they question whether, who will win, well, we all know that the Democrats will basically lose control of the House of Representatives and probably also from the Senate. And that will put some, well, according to them, that will put some pressure on Biden and possibly stop the funding of America, by America on Ukraine. And that would be disastrous for Ukraine, and Ukraine will collapse immediately. And then basically the war is lost for the West, and they will have to retreat. Now, I'm sorry, I cannot agree with that either. Whether you are a Republican or a Democrat doesn't really matter. Most of the Americans are supporting the Ukrainian effort. And they have to. As I've explained many times in my previous videos, this is not a military conflict. This is a matter of survival of the Western hegemony. That's a red word. Any case, they had the 2008 financial crisis. They have done some bad financial decisions and QE and so on and so forth. They have kicked the can down the road. It's now the end of the road, and as some would say, the chickens are coming home to roost. So they have to do something, and both parties in America know that. So there will be no stoppage of support for Ukraine. That's number one, because they will be told by the deep state, as they will call it, do it. In my previous video, I also talked about how much money really has been awarded to Ukraine, and I think it's about 18 billion. But Ukraine has only received about 17 billions worth of armament, which is not even half, it's maybe a quarter of that. So where did all the other money go? Well, that was payback. So that's another reason why they should go on. Some of the money is being spent in America, and it supports the military-industrial complex, which is seriously important to the American economy. So that's another point. And then the third point is, and that is not wokeness, but the people have created so much propaganda that if you are not a Ukrainian supporter, then you are a Putin propagandist or an agent. Nobody in the West, they have driven the narrative so far that nobody in the West can actually state like making peace and all this other nonsense. They don't want to listen. If you say that, you are a Putin apologist or Putin agent. And the biggest example would that be, not that I like the guy, I think he's an idiot, but that's Elon Musk. Elon Musk has given the Ukrainians 80 million rands worth of internet connections and basically, let's call it just a basic service. And the Ukrainians should be thankful for that. And then he made a stupid, well, not a stupid, he made a reasonable suggestion, which was nothing more than the Minsk agreement in any case. Was a slight variation for referendums. And then he was scolded out as a Putin agent, and he was rejected and even came onto the kill list for a couple of minutes before he was removed. And now he's quiet again, and he's refunding Ukraine again. And then I read a little bit of an article, is that the suggestion that Elon Musk has made has irritated a couple of officials in the American government, and they are now going to investigate his business transactions, especially some of them that are where foreigners, like Saudi Arabia, have invested in, and a Canadian-located Chinese citizen that has also invested in one of his ventures. And if they really want to be nasty, they're going to cancel those agreements because due to foreign interference and foreign security issues. So what you can see is that the deep state is not afraid of threatening people, not only politicians, but also private people. And this whole cancel culture has become so dangerous that nobody has any chance of escape from that. So if you believe that the Republicans will have a different view, no. They will vote for that legislation. They will try to put some conditions on there, maybe like where is the money going, where is the arms going, and stuff like that they've been talking about. But that's more or less what it is. If, according to Alexander, they are preparing a 50 billion aid package, which was supposed to support Ukraine until the end of next year. He argues a little bit little, but I believe it's enough. According to Ukraine, they are supposed to require $5 billion a month, which I think is way more than they really need, but that is for paying salaries and of the government employees and the soldiers and stuff like that. But I think 5 billion is a little bit too much. But even if you use 5 billion, that at least gives you 10 months that they can survive on. But the Americans are not the only guys that are going to give money. The Europeans will do as well. So on that point, I can also not agree. And then they talked about the whole implosion of the European economy, or the envisaged one, or the propagandized one, or the narrative one that we are all talking about, that Europe will collapse and it will be chaos, and most of them will become sort of failed states, and then it will become a burden of America. And is America really capable of handling such a thing? No, I'm sorry, like I said many times, the world is much, much more complexer than providing such a simplified narrative. If Europe goes down, America goes down. Make no mistake. America needs Europe in order to maintain its hegemony, in order to enforce and threaten and suppress, blackmail, yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Blackmail other weak countries in supporting them to go against the new multipolar world that's being emerging. So they need Europe, and they need the other countries as well. And if Europe is gone, then they're also gone. But these things have become unintended consequences of their actions. Like I said, again in previous videos, these people are not idiots. They are not dumb. They are highly intelligent. They have just a certain view, which we don't really agree with. But who says we are right? As I've talked in another video, is that the collapse of Europe is not means that the whole Europe will become a wasteland. During the 1929 depression, there was about 20% unemployment, which meant that 80% of the industry still survived and lived and earned a living. And there you go. It's not a total anarchy. Neither is the shortage of gas. In another video, I also explained about the gas story. The gas story generation is about 14% of the electricity being generated in Germany is done by gas. So is it that? Yes, it has a 14% influence if there was no gas. But there is gas. So what would the effect really be? 2%, 3% on electricity generation? Well, then we talk about the heating. In South Africa, we don't have gas heaters, we have electrical heaters. And we have power shortages. Yes, we are not that cold, but there is something like an electrical heater. I mean, there's even an article I read today about that electrical vehicles is going to become more expensive to drive than diesel or petrol versions, because electricity prices are now too high, and that will push up the running cost of an electrical vehicle. How much? It's like, it's just like this global warming story. It's like if you believe it and if you accept it, then everybody tries to connect the smallest item as being part of global warming, or it's going to be influenced by global warming. Doesn't matter what you can take. These people are so, like I said, they take everything and they make a big issue, even if it's a small one. So a failed Europe will not benefit America. It won't benefit the whole world. One has to think about this. Who are the biggest consumers in the world? The West. Why are the biggest consumers? Because they run the world reserve currency, and they control most of the stuff. And they created a lot of debt in order to finance a lifestyle, which we, as the rest of the world, has financed and supported and absorbed the inflation and so forth. And everybody else, okay, it's a little bit, like I said, complicated, but let's take China. China is the biggest economy now in the world. And what is the Chinese business model built on? Export. What export? Export to the Western world. If the Western America and Europe collapses, then there is no more market. Okay, there is a market, but let's say 20% is lost. So it will affect China. And if it's less sales and less workers and less money, then there will be a lower demand for resources. Then countries like South Africa, which is an exporting resource country, will also suffer. And you can see there's a lot of stuff that's interconnected that will finally have an influence on the whole situation. So it's not only America and Europe. It is the whole world. I don't know where you are, but brace yourself, because you will also be affected. Maybe to a lesser extent, maybe not if you are not connected to that field, but that's how things go. In any case, that's my story for today. There are some other items on the video which I'm not going to discuss now. You can have a look at yourself and ask yourself your own questions and decide whether you want to believe the narrative or not. Please subscribe to the channel, spread the word, spread the URL so that we can have more subscribers. And like the video if you like what you heard. So until next time, cheers.